We are looking right at one of the most magnificent buildings, I would say, in the entire world, the Pantheon. The Pantheon is much older than it looks. If you are the tourist who hasn't even read any history, I don't blame you for maybe thinking that the Pantheon is some Renaissance building, because the Pantheon looks a whole lot like many governmental buildings all around the US, like the New York Supreme Court building. Also looks like many other buildings all around Europe. London has many buildings like it, but this probably inspired them all. Now, from the outside, it's already monumental, but wait until we go inside. So up here we see M. Agrippa, LF, etc. Agrippa is the main name right there, Marcus Agrippa. This confused historians for many, many centuries, because if you have a huge name on top of it, Roman emperors weren't shy of their ambitions. They loved to showcase what they built. But Marcus Agrippa never built this Pantheon. Marcus Agrippa was one of the closest confidants of Emperor Augustus, the very first Roman emperor. But this was built by Emperor Hadrian. Now, Emperor Hadrian was alive during 100 AD, and in 125 AD, Emperor Hadrian was obsessed with architecture. So much so that one of the top architects in the Roman Empire actually disliked Hadrian's ambitions to be an architect. Hadrian went to this very famous architect and sent him the plans of a building that would be the new Pantheon of Rome. Now, what is a Pantheon? Well, you can tell by the words. Pan, which means all or across, and Theon or Theos, which means God or gods. This is the monument to all the gods of Rome. So Hadrian showed these plans to that architect. And the plaza was much larger, about twice the size of this one, a little bit lower actually. So when we will be facing the Pantheon, it will actually look much higher to our perspective. The architect looked at those plans, he was like, it's a bit too low. It could be a little bit higher. I don't like the ceiling, looks kind of plain. Hadrian absolutely disliked that, because it deeply pained him. He loved architecture, and he decided to punish the man and imprison him. Luckily, that architect who dared to go against the word of the emperor did not take up this job. Hadrian ended up hiring another team of architects who ended up working with him through many other projects all around ancient Rome. So by 125 AD, the Pantheon was constructed. All right, everyone, brace yourselves. This is the entrance to the Pantheon. Now, from the outside, it looks like every other building across the Western world. But we are greeted immediately with these huge iron doors. These doors are the oldest doors you can find fully intact from ancient Rome, or at least metal doors, and one of the largest doors fully intact from the ancient era in the entire world. These are called the Doors of Hadrian. Oh, wow. Right above, we're looking at the oculus, the opening on top of the Pantheon, and no, it's not covered in glass. That is a fully open dome here in Rome. Coffers all around. The sun shines right through it. Today, it's a pretty cloudy day, so we're not going to see the sunspot, but The Pantheon almost acts like an entire huge, massive spherical sundial. Now, why did the Pantheon survive for so long, and especially fully intact? Well, it's because it was later adopted by the Christian religion pretty early on and made into a temple for the Virgin Mary, and they called this Santa Maria Rotunda. Now, it's kind of funny if you translate directly into English, which would translate to Saint Mary the Rotund, but does not mean that Mary was rotund, unlike, another religious figure like the Buddha is depicted rotund. No, it just means that is a round building. So immediately we can see, even with the camera, that the field of view of the Pantheon is perfectly aligned to our field of view from our eyes. So this is a building very much of the human scale. Unlike the monument architecture that we saw of Victor Emmanuel, those type of architecture that was built after 1900 was meant to make you feel small. But back in ancient Roman times, this was meant to make you feel divine, connected to the heavens above. Even before the age of Christianity, since this was the Pantheon, it was meant to make you feel like you were communicating with the Roman gods themselves. Now, if you were to take a perfect sphere, you can fit it right inside here of the Pantheon. Perfect sphere could fit right in the middle of the Pantheon, which is very unusual for a building. But how did they build a dome this big? Because this dome is larger in diameter than the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. It's the largest unreinforced dome in the entire world. How did Hadrian do this? Well, Hadrian might have been a lover of architecture and might have been a great amateur architect, but he wasn't a genius mathematician, nor was he a genius engineer on his own. He had a very great team, and their team figured something out. Because the Romans, a few decades earlier, started mastering the art of concrete. Concrete, a new invention in the Western world, made construction much easier. Rome went from using mostly brickwork to making these magnificent, huge buildings out of poured concrete. What happens if it rains? Well, it's open all the time. Rain, snow, hail, thunderstorm, global apocalypse, it'll still be open. And there is a little trick to make sure it doesn't flood. It's right here. There's 22 drainage holes throughout the middle of the Pantheon. And the floors do get wet, so the drainage is not so efficient, but the entire Pantheon won't flood. And let's go on directly underneath and look up. So here we see a circle enclosed in the square. So how did they build this then? Well, concrete. But the thing is, if you pour this with the same concrete all the way to the top, the entire thing will collapse. That wouldn't be good at all, especially standing here. And I'm standing here nearly 2,000 years later, and it doesn't look like it's about to fall. It looks actually pretty steady. Well, they did two things. One, they used different types of concrete as they went higher. They did it in 3 different sections. Right there, and then the top. The first section had very heavy rocks. The second section had a little bit lighter rocks. They're kind of like similar to like the stuff you find nearby Marble Mountains. And then the top actually had basalt. Now, basalt is volcanic rock found by nearby Mount Vesuvius. Now, they also built buttresses on the outside of the Pantheon, which we'll take a look at later. Now, one thing you should realize is these are not aligned. Huh. Why are these windows not aligned? It's actually done in a way to make you bring attention to the dome. As I mentioned, this is kind of a place to feel like you're connected with the divine. The divine might have not been the best word to use in ancient Roman mythology, but more connected with the gods. So it's on the line so you can bring attention to the rest. Now, these coffers are very interesting, and they actually help distribute the weight of the dome above. So that's how this magnificent structure is still standing to this day. Marvelously so, 2,000 years. Now, once you've been here in the Pantheon, now that you've seen this video in great detail of the Pantheon, you'll start seeing this type of structure everywhere. As I mentioned, New York Supreme Court building looks like a Pantheon. Many buildings in Washington, D.C., including Jefferson's Memorial, looks like the Pantheon. And you can probably name dozens of different buildings in Paris, London, and many other cities around the world. If you know of any, let me know in the comments. So there's three very interesting people buried here. Umberto I and Margarita de Savoy buried right here, entombed right here. Now, Margarita de Savoy, you might recognize her from multiple pizza history videos I've done in New York City. Margarita de Savoy inspired the Margarita pizza, which is the colors of the Italian flag. And they're entombed right here. But right next to Margarita is probably one of the top 3 famous painters of all the Renaissance of Rome. Raphael, who's entombed right here. Raphael painted the Pope apartments in Vatican City, and also he had a very terrible feud with Michelangelo, who is the painter of the Sistine Chapel. So let me show you quickly a little bit more of the Basilica. Here's the Basilica of Santa Maria at Martus. Jesus on the cross. Huge, beautiful columns. And one more time, the majesty of the domes. And there we go. Oh, there we go. Yes. Yes. Oh, look at that. Oh, thank God for the sun. Or should I say thank gods for the sun. Helios has come. So the Pantheon is free to enter. They used to enforce silence, but I think since it's not a holy day, they are not enforcing silence. So you can come in here at your leisure. It's free all throughout the day and open until 7 p.m. And we have a few other people buried here. But now, let's go outside to learn about a painter that was on the run, a painter that was inspired by Raphael. This painter came after the era of Raphael, after the Renaissance period, and started the Baroque period. Let's go to St. Luigi de Francis. All right, let's go back through the doors. I'm going to touch these doors. Please don't tell anyone. Let's touch the doors of Hadrian. Wow. So these columns over here are one single piece. They're not cut up into sections like most columns in the Greek world. These were imported from Egypt, all in one single piece. So here we're seeing the backside of the Pantheon. You can see that there used to be buttresses attached to the Pantheon. They were removed shortly after the construction, and that's why it's still an unreinforced dome, larger in diameter than St. Peter's Basilica, almost taller than St. Peter's as well. It's tall.